first up is going to be the topic of American Promise. Rosie is going to give some quick information on our organization and its founding. Second is the constitutional amendment process. We'll talk about the process briefly and explain where the 28th Amendment fits in that process. Item number 3, we'll talk about American Promise Associations, or as we call them, our APAs. We'll talk about how they work, how our citizen-led groups and members are emerging as local leaders right now around the country. And then we will dive into our Q&A, which I'm hoping will be a thorough session that will answer any questions you have. So please, as Rosie and I are talking, make note of any questions that pop into your mind. And then we'll finish off the night by asking you guys a question, which is who's interested in a one-on-one call with one of us to learn more about launching an APA in your community. And before we get there, we'll walk through the process of doing this step by step. And if you do call us, it's a process that we continue to work with you step by step. So hopefully in the next hour, Rosie and I can convince you that we are friendly, helpful people, and you want to spend a little bit more time with us and have us come visit your community. And with that, I will turn it to Rosie.
Yeah, thanks, Kimberly. So I'm going to start by giving some background on American Promise as an organization. And first of all, thank you all again for coming out tonight, especially on a Monday. We really, really appreciate it. So how American Promise got started. Jeff Clements, president of American Promise, has practiced law for over 3 decades in public service and in private practice. In the 1990s, he served as Assistant Attorney General in Massachusetts and was part of a team of lawyers litigating against global tobacco corporations, which is where he witnessed firsthand how, using the legal argument that corporations enjoyed the same First Amendment rights as people, corporations were increasingly able to change federal and state laws in favor of a wealthy few at the expense of the majority of Americans. And so in 2009, as the Citizens United versus the SEC Supreme Court case was making its way through the courts, Jeff recognized that its implications were not some entirely new trend in our democracy, but rather an alarming jump in a set of increasingly reckless Supreme Court decisions relating to the political power of money and corporations in our democracy. He then filed an amicus brief, the Obama case, and laid out the dangers of striking down over a century's worth of campaign finance law under the premise of free speech. And unfortunately, we all know how the court went. It was a 5-4 decision ruling in favor of Citizens United, and that was when Jeff then spent the next couple of years heavily involved in this movement to win a constitutional amendment. He then published his book, Corporations Are Not People, Reclaiming Democracy from Big Money and Global Corporations, in 2014. And so then in 2016, 6 years after the Citizens United decision and 6 years into the movement to overturn its effects, Jeff figured that the way he could continue to serve this movement was by starting American Promise, an organization fully focused on winning the 28th Amendment. So American Promise, we are a cross-partisan solution to this cross-partisan problem. People of any and every background come together at American Promise with the sole purpose of getting big money out of politics and winning the 28th Amendment. We have this very special focus on really empowering APA groups month in and month out. Getting money out of politics really is an issue that all Americans, regardless of political party, overwhelmingly support. This commitment to cross-partisanship also shows up in places such as our advisory council, where we have people like progressive Nina Turner, who is the president of Bernie Sanders' Our Revolution Group, working together with people like the conservative Al Simpson, the retired Wyoming Republican U.S. Senator, for the same vision, that money is corrupting our democracy, and the only way to fix it is through a constitutional amendment. I'm going to turn it back over to Kimberly.
Thank you, Rosie. Yeah, and I would absolutely just like to take the opportunity to underscore cross-partisan and lots of support. I think I would even say that our support is week in and week out, not just month in and month out. So that concludes our first agenda item, some background on American Promise. And with that, we'll go on to the second agenda item, winning a constitutional amendment, the process to do that. So winning a constitutional amendment is a 2-step process, and the first step can be done in one of 2 ways. The first step is to propose an amendment. And one way that we can do that is by having 2/3 of Congress pass an amendment proposal. So that would be 290 votes in the House and 67 votes in the Senate. The other way to propose an amendment is through a convention of the states. So this is where 2/3 of state legislatures, aka 34 state legislatures, call for a constitutional convention around a single issue. And then hopefully that convention would conclude by proposing an amendment. So the second step to winning an amendment is ratification. So once an amendment is proposed either by Congress or by a convention, the proposal is sent out to the states and has to be ratified by 3/4 of states, aka 38 states. So that is the process, the theory. Next question, of course, is where is our push for a campaign finance reform amendment at the moment? And the answer is over 800 cities and towns have passed local resolutions calling for this amendment. 19 states have formally called on Congress to propose this constitutional amendment, and of those, 5 states have taken the added measure of calling for a constitutional convention. And most importantly, about 80% of Americans across the political spectrum, so it only varies by about 3 percentage points between Republicans, Democrats, and independents. So, really 80% of Americans across the political spectrum know that our government is not working as intended, and that it is important to start limiting money's influence in order to restore our American promise. And so we are excited to be talking on the phone tonight with many people in that 80%. And I am now going to kick it back to Rosie to cover our third agenda item, how we're starting APAs and empowering Americans around the country.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. It's really good to know the nitty-gritty process for winning a constitutional amendment, but put simply, we need votes, not money, to be on our democracy's political currency. So what can we do? We've got to work together with people around us, engaging with elected officials, the media, and the general public all around the need to get money out of politics. And that American Promise, supporting this citizen action, is what we do. So here's the process. Say you want to learn more about starting an APA in your community. You would let Kimberly and I know that you're interested, and we would set up a call describing the process, and we'll support you every single step of the way. After that, you would get a handful of friends, say like 3 to 7, together who also care about this money and politics issue, and myself or Kimberly would have about an hour-long Skype call with you, and we would talk about American Promise as the organization, historically, on how our country has gotten to this point, and tangibly what can people do to fix our democracy. And at the end of that call, we will find out how many each of the attendees will invite other folks to a launch meeting. And a launch meeting is really, really fun and a really inspiring event where Kimberly or myself will come out to wherever you are in the country, and we'll lead a discussion about what all people can do in that community specific to where you are in the country to help win the 28th Amendment. And in the past, anywhere from 10 to about 70 people have typically shown up at these events, and typically a really strong group of 10 to 20 people will leave the meeting as members of your new American Promise Association. From there, Kimberly or myself will lead a group through the 4-part new group trainings. And these are 4 meetings, typically one every other week, usually whatever the group is comfortable with, wherever we go over the issue, connect with one another, and strategize locally about how to best engage elected officials, the media, and the general public about the need to win a 28th Amendment and get big money out of politics. The really exciting thing about this organization is that not one community is the same. They're all different, and that's really exciting, and that we have the bandwidth in order to help everyone regardless of whether in a town of 20 or 2 million. So it's not unusual for an APA to have a meeting with their member of Congress or a congressional aide by the end of those trainings. People report taking actions that they've never taken before and seeing themselves in this really new and empowering light. They're seeing themselves as change makers. So let me give you a couple examples of APAs being in action. One of our leaders, Vicki Barnes, she's the leader of the St. Paul, Minnesota APA. She's really built on the momentum harnessed from a meeting with Republican Member of Congress Eric Paulson to meet with Republican state legislators and work toward a resolution in Minnesota. We also have Ann Drum in Dallas, Texas, and she is launching a North Texas APA with the goal of getting 12 city resolutions by 2020, so that's really exciting. Bob Winkleman from Narberth, Pennsylvania, he just organized a lobby day about a week ago, and he met with 12 of his state representatives. Greg Fox, who I see is on this call tonight, recently retired to Tucson, Arizona, and just scheduled a meeting with Kimberly and 6 of his new neighbors to talk about launching an APA, so good on you, Greg. Ishwari Salahub and John House were at the same stage 2 years ago in 2017 in Santa Fe, New Mexico. In 2018, they met every single one of their members of Congress, and 2 months ago that work really paid off because the city of Santa Fe, New Mexico just passed a resolution for a 28th Amendment. So these are just a few of the really thousands of examples of people stepping up, leading by example, and making sure that our elected officials respond to people, not profits. And I'm going to kick it back to Kimberly.
Thanks, Rosie. And yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Greg. Exciting to have you on the call tonight. I'm glad we could give you some kudos that you very much deserved. And I think, from those examples, I definitely want to take the chance to highlight, all of these leaders who have achieved local resolutions and state resolutions around the country were at one point or another in your guys' seat, just finding out about American Promise and maybe on an intro call. And, time and again, we hear back from our members that they're just kind of amazed by how small step by small step, without ever being asked to do something that seems out of their reach, they're able to build up to, really big, notable accomplishments. So before we launch into our Q&A, I want to first ask you guys if there's anyone who already knows that they're interested in a follow-up call from Rosie or myself to start talking about the steps to start an APA. I'm curious to hear from you. So we'll do that by, if that's something that interests you, go ahead and press 1 on your keypad, and we'll make a note of it, and we'll reach out to you. So again, anytime now, feel free, go ahead, press 1. And this is just a commitment to have a call with Rosie or myself to learn more. Nothing more to it. No scamming here. We're not collecting any data for sure. But also, we know that you're not signing up for anything beyond just a call with either Rosie or myself to talk one-on-one about starting an APA in your community. And, maybe the next time we have one of these intro calls in 3-4 months, we'll be talking about you and using you as an example. Awesome. Okay. Loving the signs of support. All right. Sweet. Super, guys. This is awesome. Okay. So with that, we will go on to the Q&A session. So I'll check in with everyone again at the end of the call if they're interested in that kind of one-on-one call with Rosie or myself. But for now, let's dive into answering your questions. So if you have a question, press 3 on your keypad, and I will call on you. And we're especially looking for questions that would help clarify steps needed to start an APA. So go ahead and press 3 if you've got a question.
I see that Floyd Kirshen has a question, so why don't you let us know what your question is, Floyd, and where you're coming in from tonight.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes, hi.
Okay, I'm calling from Seattle. How do I find out about any existing APAs in my area?
Yeah, that's an absolutely fantastic question. You can go to AmericanPromise.net, and on our website we have a map of all the states represented along with those APAs represented and who you can contact for that. By the way, all the questions we'll be answering tonight we'll also send in a recap email. But yeah, go to AmericanPromise.net, and on that website is a map with where you can get involved in your local APAs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and I see that Judy Bollinger has a hand up. Hopefully I said that correctly. One moment. All right, Judy, you are off mute, so let us know where are you calling in from and what is your question?
Judy from El Cerrito, California. My question.
Hey, Judy, how's it going?
Okay, my question is, I understand that California has already, legislature has already passed in favor of this amendment. So is there work to be done in California, or is this not a place to put energy?
All right. Thank you for the question, Judy. And for everyone else, I was at least having, my volume was a little bit low there. So the question was, in California, there has already been a state resolution passed. So does that mean that there is no more work to be done in California? And the answer is there is still plenty of work to be done in California and in any state that's passed a resolution. So Judy, definitely thank you for that question, because I'm sure you are not the only person calling in from one of the states that has passed a resolution. So as we talked about, there are these two routes to a constitutional amendment being proposed. And the one that's happened for all past 27 amendments has been that 2/3 of Congress has passed something. So the resolutions that states have passed, while they put political pressure on our Congress people, and while they, also, I guess, provide political support to our Congress people to do what their constituents want by, giving those politicians something they can concretely point to and say, hey, this is something my constituents want, in terms of justifying their support for a constitutional amendment to, let's say, fellow party members. But these state resolutions are non-binding, and so, ultimately there's still a lot of work to do in getting actual support, getting our Congress people to co-sponsor and sign on to bills that are proposing constitutional amendments. Even one of our states where we have a number of APAs is New Jersey, and they passed the state resolution. And actually, one of the things we're thinking about doing there is having our APAs work toward New Jersey passing another state resolution, just because it's been a while. And so, it might be beneficial to politicians from New Jersey to have something a little bit more recent to point to. So that's not to say that every state needs to renew their resolution, but just to point out that, getting a state resolution is certainly not the end of the game. And Judy, if you're interested, we are interested in working with you. So thanks, Judy. Anyone else, if you have a question, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, that was a great question, Judy. I see that John Sonnen has his hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and take you off mute. John, why don't you let us know where you're calling from tonight and what's your question?
Hi, John Sonnen from Juneau, Alaska. And I'm sorry, on some mass transit right now, so probably might be hard to hear me clearly.
No worries.
Jeff Clements was in town last week, and there were a bunch of people to listen to his proposal. Is there any way I can get some contacts for starting an APA up here?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. About, for people that didn't hear, it was Jeff Clements is actually in Juneau, Alaska as of last week, and he was giving some talks and reaching out to people that might want to start an APA. So how does one get in contact with people that are starting an APA? The answer would be to call us, really. We have that information. So once we complete an event, we reach out to those people that want to create an APA. And if you would like to get in contact with those people, you can just call or email us, which we would be happy to provide our contact info at the end of this call. Sound good?
But I'd like a list of the people that were in town here.
Like a list of people that went to the event. Understood. While we can't necessarily provide everyone's all of the information that we get, we will provide a follow-up email at the end of this call, and specifically to you, John, with those people that went to those events, and so you can reach out to them.
Oh, great. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. And I see Greg Falk has his hand up, so very excited. All right, Greg, you are off mute. How are you doing tonight? And if you could just reiterate for people where you're calling in from.
Yeah, great. I'm calling from Tucson, Arizona, and as we work to have an amendment passed, I'm curious where we're at in terms of reaching agreement about the exact wording of the amendment.
Yes, thank you. Love that question. It gives us the opportunity to highlight a big part of what American Promise is contributing to the movement is that we are hosting, for 18 months we've been holding what we call Writing the 28th Amendment, which started off with 6 months of bringing together legal scholars and experts from a variety of places and backgrounds to talk about the wording for the amendment and what would be important, and that we're now continuing by going out and bringing that question, to the American people. And so we hold Writing the 28th Amendments events around the country, and people get to have give us input on what issues they would like to see as part of the amendment. So, for those of you who are just starting to learn about these things, there are a couple different kind of legal topics that can get involved in terms of how to address money in politics. And so, the Citizens United ruling in 2010 rested on two ideas. One, that money is speech. And so, it's protected under the First Amendment as speech. And the other is that corporations are people. And so because corporations are people, they have those First Amendment rights. And so, just as an example, two different issues that you could have as part of the amendment. One would be, do we address that money is not speech? And another would be, do we address that corporations are not people? And so this can kind of get into some of the technical details. Now, this is important in that when the amendment is written, it'll, it will one way or the other, either say something or not say something about the issues. But at this point, we're making lots of progress as an organization without committing to just a single wording of the amendment. And that's really because a lot of these issues are, if you think about democracy as a house, they're features of the house. But the idea of just having an amendment that gives states and our country the right to limit money in politics, that's really the foundation. And so any amendment that does that is laying a better foundation for us to build the house of democracy upon. And the amendment may or may not include other features of that house. But what's important, and the reason that we support a number of the bills that exist right now, is because they all are laying a good foundation. So thank you, Greg. All right. If anyone else has a question, the number to press on your keypad is 3. Feel free, press 3, and we'll call on you. The other thing that might be helpful is we can address one of the questions that often comes up, which is, in this space there are a number of different groups, and what is it that makes American Promise unique among those? So maybe I'll let Rosie answer that, because that's a question that we often get.
Yeah, great question, Kimberly. So what makes American Promise different from the other groups? Because there are quite a lot of groups in this cause space of fighting for a constitutional amendment, which I see as a strength more than a weakness, because one, we know that, as we mentioned earlier, 80% of Americans want to get money out of politics. According to a poll by Lawrence Lessig, 90% of Americans believe that there's something wrong with our government, we need to fix it. But the one thing that makes American Promise different, and there's two approaches to this. One, we approach everything with a cross-partisan mindset, and that we believe that this is not a Democrat issue, it's not a Republican issue, it's not an independent issue, it's an American issue, and we can all agree that regardless of our political beliefs, this is a very important issue that we can all come to the table on with our different backgrounds and ideas, and mindsets, and we can really fix our democracy cross-partisanly. But the other thing that I think is my favorite part about this is that we really empower other groups we empower all groups rather, to do whatever is best for their communities, because we can't possibly know every single community's background as well as you do who live in that community. So we are here to help you every single step of the way. We have a 4-part group training, as we mentioned earlier, where we help you learn how to talk to your representatives and write letters to the editor, and just really with ballot measures and just anything that your community needs, we are here for you 24/7, and we really love and support one another. So if you're looking for a community that's going to have your back, American Promise is the group for you.
Yes, thank you, Rosie. And American Promise is certainly the group for me. And I see that Grace has her hand up. So Grace, one moment. All right, Grace, you are off mute. If you could let everyone know where you're calling in from and what your question is.
Yeah, this is Grace from Easton, Maryland, and I live in a very red part of the state, and I've been working on a lot of issues, and I was just curious, you sort of touched on my question, which is there are other groups. There's a group called Represent Us, and another, and in Maryland they have one called Represent Maryland, which sounds like it does very similarly to what you do. Are you familiar with that group?
Yeah, we are, and actually they're hosting a summit in Nashville at the end of this week that we're attending.
Oh, okay. So you are working, you are collaborating. Yeah, I'm very interested in this subject because being concerned about the environment first, I got involved with politics about, 12 years ago or so. And I was just wondering to be part of American Promise. I know someone who started a Represent Us group here, but I figured I'd work on the environment. But I feel like I'm spinning my wheels because certain people are worried about re-election, and they're more worried about their campaign finances than they are about what their voters want. So I'm kind of at a place where I'm always thinking about how I can best spend my time for the causes.
Yeah.
So I guess I wanted to ask you, if you got involved in this, do you have to become a 501, become incorporated, a 501c3 or C4 or something, and have bylaws and all that?
Sure. All right. Great question. You are clearly well-versed in the realm of political groups. So for those of you who may not know, a 501c3 or 501c4 are different tax structures, essentially. If you are going to form an organization, what are you going to call? What type of an organization is it for the purposes of taxes? And so the answer I can definitely give you is no. Our individual APAs, I do not believe have to register. Although admittedly, neither Rosie or myself is pretending to be the legal experts here at APA, so we'll double check, and in the follow-up email I'll correct myself if I need to. But to kind of respond to some of the other parts of your question, yeah, absolutely. If you're interested in other issues, is this the right place to come? I would say definitely. That's how I got here too. I got here by way of an interest in agricultural issues and the rights of small farmers, and just realized that the reason a lot of common sense reform wasn't happening is because corporations like Monsanto, meat lobbies, crop lobbies, were buying politicians' votes, and so we say. The issue of campaign finance reform is not necessarily the most important issue. It's not that we think it's more important than, the environment, if that's your issue, or, holding Wall Street accountable, if that's your issue, but it is the first issue. It's the issue that, again, we need to solve to lay that foundation, to build a government on top of, a democracy a foundation of democracy in a democratic republic that is responsive to the needs of the people and can solve issues within, various other topics. And so if you have realized that and you want to work on the issue of campaign finance reform, why is it that you should come to American Promise versus Represent Us or any other group? And I would go back to what Rosie said about the support that we at American Promise provide. And this is definitely, can say without a doubt, we are very unique in this space in the level of support that we provide citizens around the country. We provide a lot of personal contact. Rosie and I call and email people around the country every day. We're in touch with them. We know about their lives outside of APA as well. And ultimately, we provide the training and month-by-month actions and ideas to empower you to be a citizen, for this issue. But the kind of skills we train people in, writing letters to the editor, setting up meetings with your member of Congress, they're not just things that are relevant to American Promise. You can use those for any issue that you care about, and once we have the 28th Amendment and restored the American Promise in our democratic republic, former APA members will hopefully be leading civic examples. So that would be my answer to that. Thank you, Grace.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for that question. I see that James Lom has a question, so I'm going to go ahead and take you off mute, James, and let us know your question and where you're calling from.
Can you hear me?
Hi, James. I can hear you. Yes.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, okay. Because I'm in my car on a speakerphone. I'm from Florida, but I'm driving in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
Couple of things. I don't know if anybody in the American Promise group anywhere in the nation has made a concerted effort to get somebody like a Rachel Maddow to handle a story on national television about this subject. Has anybody really focused on that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. While we are currently pushing with pieces of media on social media, in newspapers, and online, just the other day, actually, not on Rachel Maddow, but on Morning Joe, presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg called for a constitutional amendment to get overturn Citizens United and get money out of politics. So this issue is becoming more prevalent in the media. There's dozens of letters to the editor and op-eds posted every day. And so that's a great point to reach out to other media groups, and we're definitely working on that. But yeah, that's a great question. Do you have any other ones?
Yeah, no, well, I want to make another comment on that, because I've spoken to probably 30 or 40 people mentioning Amendment 28, and not a single one ever knew anything about it. And so I thought to myself, well, when Lewis Powell wrote his 34-page memo for the Chamber of Commerce back in the early 70s, which resulted in Citizens United eventually, he had a very concerted plan, and that memo went out from the chamber to every boardroom of major corporations in the country. So, I mean, I think that there's got to be more effort at the top, rather not only at the grassroots, to get the message out in mass media.
Yeah, no, I totally see your point, James, and that's I really, really admire your passion. And yes, we definitely need to get really high up people in the government to call for this, which we're definitely working on. But we believe in American Promise that change never happens from the top down; it happens from the bottom up. So we are focusing on grassroots energy, and that talking to your neighbors, talking to your fellow constituents, talking to your members of Congress and your fellow business owners, talking to people in your community. And that once we have a huge base of support, then we'll go to our members of Congress, our senators, our president, and call for this, because once they find that this is something that a lot of people in their districts support, they will eventually come around. And we actually have, I don't know if we've mentioned it, close to 200 representatives are already in favor of this. So the way our grassroots approach we're working on is working. So I really admire your support. And I see another question is coming in from Chris Corfanta. So I'm going to go ahead and let Kimberly take this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I call on Chris, I would just also like to reiterate that definitely there are people here at American Promise that are working at the grass tips. They're in touch with legislators, and we would certainly love to be featured on the Rachel Maddow Show. But ultimately, what we all want is democracy, is government of the people, by the people, for the people, and you don't get government for the people when it's government of the media. So it really, we believe, comes down to we also have to have citizens willing to put in the work. All right, so with that, I will call on Chris. So Chris, you are off mute. Can we hear where you're calling in from and what your question is?
I'm calling from Ranchester, Wyoming, and it's so great to hear that people are from all over the country here concerned about the issue. Before I ask my question, I concur with the previous fellow. Our group was even talking about how great it would be if something like 60 Minutes or Rachel Maddow or one of the late night news guys would do a segment on it. So just people, I know, and I agree with the grassroots. We're really active here. But my question is, we're thinking of having, I bought a bunch of the Jeff Clement's books, Corporations Are Not People, and I was just wondering if anybody has had a book group with discussion questions that we could borrow, because that's what we're going to do next here, is just have a discussion group, the book.
Yeah, hi Chris, this is Rosie. That's a fantastic question. A lot of our members become involved after reading the book. The Portland APA was actually launched by a group of 4 realtors who had a monthly book club, picked Jeff's book, and were really, truly inspired to get involved through that means. So I would love to send you over some of the questions that they talked about and what caused them to start their APA, because they really believed in, well, one of the approaches we do are Democracy is Brewing events, where we go to a local pub or brewery or some kind of restaurant or establishment like that, and then we go and talk about democracy and Citizens United and getting money out of politics that way, in the way that the revolution of the American Revolution was started, in a pub. I love the idea of book clubs, and I would be happy to send you that information. Sound good?
Great. I'm sure you have my email. That would be fantastic. Any ideas like that? Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Happy to do that.
All right, and so next, I see, one second. All right, Roscoe, we see has a hand up. So Roscoe, I'm going to take you off mute. Let us know, where are you calling in from and what is your question?
Well, I live in Brookdale, California, but I'm currently in upstate New York. And I'm actually going to the Unrigged Summit in Nashville.
Oh, wow,
because
great.
I can. Yeah, I'm sort of looking forward to it, but I'm curious. I've been following American Promise a little bit. I'm on your email list, and I have 2 questions. The one is the quote 28th Amendment unquote, has the proposed amendment been written? I mean, is it actually on paper? Have people decided what it's going to say, or is it still sort of malleable?
Okay. And then, all right, I can address that, and then I'll turn it back to you to ask your second question. So the answer is actually a couple different proposals have been concretely written down. So right now in the House, there are at least two what are known as House Joint Resolutions. So they're two bills that both propose 28th constitutional amendments to limit the influence of money in politics. There are actually, maybe about 5 of these, but only 2 of them have quite a number of co-sponsors. So they're known as HJR2 and HJR48. And so there definitely are some proposals that have been concretely written and, more than that, even introduced to the House. And in past years, there have been versions of those, with the same text introduced in the Senate. But there's also the possibility that, what will ultimately become the 28th Amendment will be through a different resolution. And, so if for people who might not be satisfied with what's out there, there's definitely still a role for them to play. All right, so you're back off mute again. Do you have a second question?
Yeah, thank you. That was helpful. I'm going to look up HJR2 and HJR48. You said they were?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage anyone
House
who's
resolutions.
interested in these
I'll read up on.
Yeah, and I'll just throw out while I have the chance. I would encourage anyone to learn more about these by going to unitedforthepeople.org. So that's United, the number 4, thepeople.org. Okay, so thanks for giving us the opportunity to share that. And what was your second question, Roscoe?
My second question is kind of a follow-up to that. Does anybody have a vision of if this is going to pass, how the heck is politics going to work? I mean, we can't take all the money out of politics. So somewhere between no money in politics and too much money in politics, or the wrong kind of money in politics, what's the vision? Because passing the amendment doesn't solve the problem of governing.
Here, absolutely. And this is also like something important for us to talk about. The amendment, right now it is unconstitutional for states or the federal government to limit the influence of money in politics. And that's just based on the Supreme Court's ruling in 2010 on Citizens United. And so really what the amendment will do is it will make it constitutional once again for our state and federal governments to regulate money in politics, but absolutely that does not fill in what those regulations will be. And actually, that's something that it would not, be beneficial for the amendment to get into. Amendments are powerful in their simplicity, just being a couple sentences. But what it would allow from there is for the federal government for federal elections and states for, elections under their purview to come up with their own solutions and find out for their constituents what kind of solutions would work. And there are a number of these ideas, whether it's matching small dollar donations or publicly funded elections. But what's interesting, and I didn't even learn this until I joined American Promise, is that before Citizens United, maybe half of states had regulations in place already limiting the influence of money in politics. And then when the 2010 ruling came out, we're just forced to stop enacting those because the Supreme Court had deemed it unconstitutional. So, in a number of places, it would be very easy to, just return the language that had been used in the past as at least a starting point. So we think that this kind of powerful in its simplicity amendment will lay the groundwork, and actually will very quickly see regulation cropping up shortly after that without too much needed work in many places. So thank you, Roscoe. All right. Anyone else? If you have a question, feel free to press 3 on your keypad. All right. Well, as we're coming up on, or just passing a quarter to, oh, yes, Grace, love to see you continuing to ask questions. Please, everyone, feel free to ask more than one question. All right, I'll turn this one over to Rosie.
Yeah, as you know, hi, yeah, it's Grace in Easton, Maryland again. I was just curious, how are you funded by what you do? I mean, how is your work funded?
Yeah, that is an absolutely fantastic question and a really important question to ask nowadays, especially in the area we work in. So one of the ways we're funded is through a grant that we applied for back in 2016 when we first started. Another way is fundraising, in that our CEO or our president, Jeff Clements, goes around the country and talks about this issue and truly inspires people to donate money to this cause. And the third way is memberships, in that people of all backgrounds can become American Promise members with any amount of donation, $1, $5, $10. We would not accept $1 bazillion because, one, it doesn't exist, but also it just is kind of immoral. But any amount of money you will become an American Promise member. So we ask people on our email list and newly founded APAs to become members and have a monthly, yearly, or one-time donation. And that is the 3 areas in which we are funded.
Thank you, Grace. Anyone else? And yeah, absolutely. Feel free to ask a question again. All right, which we've got another example. Love it. All right, John, just took you off mute. If you could remind everyone where you're calling in from and let us know what your question is.
If that's me, I'm John Sullivan again, up here in Alaska, Juneau, Alaska. And I'm hoping that you guys have my email so that you can send me that information I requested earlier. I don't have access right now, but I will tomorrow. And if there's some way, unless you want me to call you back, private line, if you could just send a list of people that, or some out of way to contact a list of people.
Yep. Absolutely. We will do that. We've got it marked down.
I've already got wanted more information, and but I want to get that grassroots going.
Yes. All right. Broke up a little bit there, but we definitely got the sentiment. We love it. Yeah. There's going to be a follow-up. Again, in line with American Promise, providing a lot of support. We follow up all of our events and all of our calls, but we'll be sure to follow up with you personally. And I see Greg's got his hand up. I'll let Rosie take that one.
Hey, Greg, how's it going?
Good, thanks. Again, Greg from Tucson, Arizona. When you guys were talking about how an amendment could be put before the states, it was that Congress would have to pass it. And it raised a question for me because you also mentioned something about the president. If Congress votes to put an amendment before the states, is that something the president has to sign and can veto, or is the president not a part of that process?
Yeah, no, Greg, that's a fantastic question. I don't believe the president can veto an amendment. I'm going to look it up for you super quickly because we are not legal scholars just yet, and I will make sure I give you the right information. So while I'm looking that up, I'm going to hand it over to Kimberly, and she's just going to talk a little bit more about the support behind this amendment.
Yeah, and so to clarify, the process for winning an amendment, again, it's a two-step process. The first is to propose an amendment, and the second is ratification. And proposal can happen in one of two ways. Either 2/3 of Congress proposes it, or 2/3 of states call for a convention that in turn proposes an amendment. And either way that it's proposed, it'll go back to the states for ratification, and 3/4 or 38 states will need to ratify it. And it looks like Rosie can fill us in on whether and how the president comes into that process.
Yeah, thank you again for that, Kimberly. I just reread the Constitution super quickly. And no, the president cannot veto an amendment. It is only up to the Congress and the states to pass and ratify an amendment. Sound good?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Do we have any other questions? We're winding down, but we appreciate any and all questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question here, so we're happy to take any last-minute questions.
All right. Well, I hope that means that we have answered all of your questions. And to everyone who asked a question, thank you very much. And so, as promised, I'm going to wrap up by turning the questions back to you guys. And so, once again, want to check in and see, given what we talked about and some of the questions we've answered, who is interested in a one-on-one call with Rosie or myself to learn more about launching an APA. And so to let us know that you're interested, press 1 on your keypad, and we'll get back to you with a phone call. And so again, not a commitment to anything more than a phone call with Rosie and myself to just talk about, what your interests are in this and whether it would be feasible to launch an APA in your community, or what we need to do to get there. So, all right, yeah, starting to see the numbers coming in, loving it. And again, hopefully, like I said at the beginning, Rosie and I have convinced you we're good, fun people. We like to talk with our members, and definitely in these particular positions within American Promise, because we just love being in touch with people. Like we were saying, there are people here at American Promise that are working more at the grass tips end of it. But we really believe that government for the people requires government of the people, and we're excited to be building that base of engaged civic citizens that is committed to being an active member of the democracy and democratic republic in order to restore the American promise and restore our democracy.